Welcome to Newsday. Reporting live from Singapore, I'm Mariko Oi. The headlines this hour. New studies suggest the Omicron variant, though highly contagious, could be milder, with fewer people needing hospital treatment compared to previous COVID variants. But as the UK records over 100,000 new cases for the first time, there are warnings that the sheer number of infections could still overwhelm health services. A well-known statue commemorating the Tiananmen Square massacre is removed from the University of Hong Kong. Nearly a week after a super typhoon struck the Philippines, we report from a popular tourist island that's been left devastated.
You can see up there on the roof, it's been completely torn off like a can of sardines. 90% of the buildings here have been damaged.
And scientists in China reveal a perfectly preserved dinosaur embryo from at least 66 million years ago.
Live from our studio in Singapore. This is BBC News. It's Newsday.
Preliminary results from 3 scientific studies suggest that the Omicron variant may be milder than first feared, with patients running less risk of needing hospital treatment. The news comes as the UK recorded more than 100,000 new cases of coronavirus. Our medical editor, Fergal Walsh, reports.
Another record day for COVID cases and for booster jabs. But as the Omicron wave surges, at last some positive early evidence from 3 separate studies, all indicating it poses less of a threat than the Delta variant. Research by Imperial College London found around a 40% reduction in the risk of being admitted to hospital for a night or more compared to Delta. A Scottish study suggested there was a 65% lower risk of being hospitalised with Omicron, but it was based on only a few cases. While in South Africa, Omicron patients were thought to be around 75% less likely to need hospital treatment. Rather than Omicron being intrinsically milder, scientists think this is partly due to the build-up of immunity from previous infections and vaccination, but it is still good news.
There are grounds for some very cautious optimism. I put it no stronger than that. If you're unvaccinated, then you run a really big risk because it's so contagious. And they are the people who are tending to fill up the beds, especially in intensive care, but a lot of protection from vaccination.
New treatments continue to be rolled out, such as antiviral pills like molnupiravir, which should keep many of the most vulnerable from falling seriously ill once infected. The concern is the huge number of cases, even if mostly milder, could still lead to a dangerous spike in hospital admissions next month. So the scale of the Omicron threat remains uncertain. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Let's get a little more detail on those preliminary studies which suggest that the Omicron variant could be milder than first feared. Professor Aziz Sheikh is the lead author of the Edinburgh University study, and he explained the findings.
So in essence, we've got 3 core findings here, and we've been in the fortunate position of really being able to track the entire Scottish population. So the first is that we've seen Omicron just run through Scotland incredibly rapidly. So the first case was towards the end of November the 23rd. And then in the 3 to 4 weeks subsequently, we've seen that it's become the dominant variant in Scotland. So it's basically swept through the population very rapidly. The second issue, and a big unanswered question that policymakers have been grappling with, is what's the risk of severe outcomes? And by that we mean COVID-19 hospitalizations or deaths. What we've been able to show when we do analyses adjusted for all sorts of other considerations such as age, sex, underlying comorbidities, vaccination status, is that with the relatively few cases that we've got, it seems like Omicron is basically around 2/3 less likely to result in hospitalization than Delta. So these are early data, but it seems to be a consistent finding across our analysis. The third thing that we've looked at is what's the impact of third or booster vaccination doses. And what we're seeing is that as a result of these booster doses, protection against developing Omicron-associated COVID-19 is substantially increased.
Professor Aziz Sheikh there. Now, the head of the World Health Organization, meanwhile, has told a news conference that there should be enough coronavirus vaccines for all adults around the world by the end of March next year. Tedros Ghebreyesus said the supply of vaccines for the COVAX scheme was increasing. However, he warned wealthy countries were rushing to give booster jabs at the cost of poorer countries carrying out initial shots.
Blanket booster programs are likely to prolong the pandemic rather than ending it by diverting supply to countries that already have high levels of vaccination coverage, giving the virus more opportunity to spread and mutate. No country can boost its way out of the pandemic. And boosters cannot be seen as a ticket to go ahead with the planned celebrations without the need for other precautions.
And as always, there's much more on our website about all the developments on this story, including this analysis by our health and science correspondent, James Gallagher, about the latest studies on the impact of the Omicron wave. A well-known statue commemorating the deaths of students protesting in Beijing's Tiananmen Square has been removed from a university campus in Hong Kong. The removal of the 8-meter-high copper statue created by Danish sculptor Jens Galschiøt was ordered back in October. Construction workers are said to have laboured overnight to dismantle the piece known as the Pillar of Shame. The artwork, which depicts piled-up corpses and anguished faces, was one of Hong Kong's few remaining public memorials to Tiananmen Square. The BBC's Stanley Vincent is in Hong Kong and gave us this update.
In October, the university contacted the sculptor to declare that essentially this statue, following legal advice, needed to be removed. After that, they set a deadline for the removal. The deadline passed, and it wasn't clear when the statue would be removed. But in the early hours of the morning, construction workers started covering up the statue. They put up yellow barriers surrounding the statue, which is on the university campus of Hong Kong. And then in the early hours of the morning, construction workers came, the statue was removed, it was put into a container and driven away. So this is one of the last public places that remember the students that died in 1989. Many would argue that Hong Kong has changed substantially since the introduction of the national security law. In the past, tens of thousands of Hong Kong residents would gather en masse at Victoria Park to remember the people that died on that day. That has stopped. The people that have organised those past vigils, that group has been disbanded. Many of the leaders have been arrested, and people have been arrested for inciting and taking part in what was seen as an illegal assembly on June 4th last year. So many would argue that China's influence is growing at quite a rapid rate here in Hong Kong, and the city has transformed significantly since the introduction of the national security law.
Indeed, with those arrests, I understand that it is increasingly difficult to express opinions, but has there been much public reaction to this?
Not yet. I mean, it's still, it's still relatively early in the morning, and people will be waking up to the news that this statue has been removed. But like you said, it was expected that it would be removed. It wasn't clear at what time and on what day, but the removal came relatively suddenly. It seems that it was done perhaps in a way to try to minimise widespread attention. It happened at night, it happened in the dark, and construction workers covered up the statue in white sheets and yellow barriers to ensure that people couldn't see the actual dismantling of the statue. But what we do know is that the statue is now been removed from the university campus, and I think this once again marks a significant change here in the freedoms, or the perceived freedoms, or how people will perceive the freedoms here in Hong Kong.
That was Danny Vincent in Hong Kong for us. Let's take a look at some other stories in the headlines now. And Brigitte Macron, the wife of the French president, is to sue over false claims circulating on the internet that she's transgender and was born male. The false report first appeared on a far-right website and has since been circulated by conspiracy theorists. Brigitte Macron has been married to Emmanuel Macron since 2007, and she has 3 adult children from her first marriage. The European Commission has launched legal action against Poland, saying it has serious doubts about the independence and impartiality of its constitutional tribunal. It's the latest episode in the long-running dispute about the Polish government's sweeping changes to the judiciary. Poland now has 2 months to respond to the charges. It's already accused Brussels of overstepping its powers. It's nearly a week since a super typhoon hit the Philippines, killing at least 375 people and leaving hundreds of thousands without shelter. One of the worst affected areas was the popular tourist island of Siargao. From there, our correspondent Howard Johnson sent this report.
Devastation as far as the eye can see. Super Typhoon Rai first made landfall here last Thursday, packing winds in excess of 150 miles an hour and dumping huge quantities of rainfall. This dramatic footage captured the moment a new sports hall, doubling as an evacuation centre, was torn to shreds.
There was no protection. There was no roof. There was no wall. We was literally lying there, down there, and the entire nature force was like bashing on us with full power, with full force. We had nothing there.
The governor of the island estimates that 90% of buildings have been damaged.
This is my house.
This man shows me to where his home and convenience store once stood.
I'm scared because my children is no more food, and then my house is broken for the typhoon. I don't know. I'm going to start again my store and my my home.
This is a scene that we have seen many times. The roof has been ripped off like a can of sardines. The metal has been torn back. Glass is smashed up there, and you can see the roof in tatters down here. And so many people are without shelter at the moment, and people here are calling for more support. They need more aid, they need more water, more food, and at the moment the supplies are coming through, but they're not getting through quickly enough. Prices for filtered bottled water have doubled in the last week, forcing some to find other sources. This family are drawing water from an old well, but it isn't clean. Diarrhea cases are on the rise here.
It's bad for the stomach, sir, but we don't have choice. We need to drink. We don't have safety water for drink.
At the island's badly damaged airport, aid is getting through, but in limited quantities. Outside, residents have been waiting for up to 3 days for a flight off the island. It's leading to a sense of panic.
There's nothing. There's no system. We have to figure out ourselves. That's it. The real pandemic is not having a system. Sorry.
As night falls, a newly arrived Philippine Red Cross team help islanders to speak with loved ones using their satellite phone. Help is on hand here, but there needs to be a lot more. Howard Johnson, BBC News, Siargao Island.
A jury in the trial of the British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell has decided to reconvene after Christmas after failing to reach a verdict on Wednesday. Ms. Maxwell, a close associate of Jeffrey Epstein, denies 8 counts of sex trafficking and other crimes. Our correspondent Barbara Plett-Asher has been following the trial in New York.
The jury deliberated for 2 full days, but it wasn't able to reach a verdict before Christmas, and the court has now recessed for the holiday weekend. The jurors are considering 6 counts against Ghislaine Maxwell of grooming and transporting girls for sex. And the case is narrowly focused on the accusations of 4 women who say that she facilitated or participated in Jeffrey Epstein's abuse of her. The jurors have several times asked the judge to send them transcripts of testimony or to clarify certain issues. They will come back on Monday to continue deliberating about whether to convict Ghislaine Maxwell of all, some, or none of the charges. In the meantime, Ms. Maxwell will be spending Christmas at the Federal Detention Center in Brooklyn, where she's been for more than a year, with this decision still hanging over her.
You're watching Newsday on the BBC. Still to come on the programme. We look at the effects of pandemic restrictions and lockdowns on children's mental health.
The world of music's been paying tribute to George Michael, who's died from suspected heart failure at the age of 53. He sold well over 100 million albums in a career spanning more than 3 decades.
The United States troops have been trying to overthrow the dictatorship of General Manuel Noriega. The Pentagon said it's failed in its principal objective, to capture Noriega and take him to the United States to face drugs charges.
The hammer and sickle was hastily taken away. In its place, the Russian flag was hoisted over what is now no longer the Soviet Union, but the Commonwealth of Independent States.
Day broke slowly over Lockerbie, over the cockpit of Pan Am's Maid of the Seas, nose down in the soft earth. You could see what happens when a plane 8 stories high, a football pitch wide, falls from 30,000 feet.
Christmas has returned to Albania after a communist ban lasting more than 20 years. Thousands went to midnight mass in the town of Shkodra, where there were anti-communist riots 10 days ago.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsday on the BBC. I'm Mariko Oi in Singapore. Our headlines this hour. New studies suggest the Omicron variant, though highly contagious, could be milder, with fewer people needing hospital treatment compared to previous COVID variants. A well-known statue commemorating the Tiananmen Square massacre has been removed from the University of Hong Kong. The pandemic has left children falling behind academically, but parents fear their kids' mental health is suffering too. This month, a McKinsey report found nearly a third of parents in the US are worried about their child's mental health. Those concerns are higher among Black, Hispanic, and Asian families. Laura Trevelyan went to meet one mother and her daughter in New York City to find out how they're dealing with the pandemic.
A festive outing for Jackie and her daughter Jordan. For the first grader, it's exciting to be in town.
Let me give you hand sanitizer.
Jackie worries about her 6-year-old, though, who developed anxiety during the pandemic after her preschool classes ended abruptly.
I came out of the pandemic with some anxiety myself, and so, I'm kind of passing through the skills that I picked up to cope with my own anxiety to her. So we have like a bedtime routine now where before she goes to sleep, I'll kind of sit with her, and in the dark sometimes we'll just talk about the day, we'll talk about the things that bothered her. She's really good at communicating her feelings when she has a safe space. So, we do that, we talk.
Anxiety is something that Carmen Urena is dealing with in the classroom.
It's really interesting to see how children are processing, even the way that they treat each other.
She teaches kindergarten and first grade in East Harlem, which was hit hard by the pandemic, and families lost loved ones and livelihoods.
For me, the most telling is the separation anxiety. If there's a staff member absent, there's a lot of anxiety around that. Is so-and-so going to be back tomorrow? Why aren't they here? At the beginning of the school year, we saw that separation anxiety from families last a little longer than it usually does. We're usually after like day 2 or 3, the crying has subsided when we're saying goodbye to our grown-up, but it certainly lasted a little longer.
The effect of the pandemic on education is still unfolding. But one thing's clear here in New York City, enrollment is down, as parents either don't feel safe sending their kids back to school or they've left the city altogether.
I spoke to Bruce Fuller, a sociologist who studies early childhood, about the effects of all this pandemic anxiety on how kids learn.
We've long known that it's the social emotional comfort and motivation children feel that provides the foundation for cognitive growth and pre-literacy development, oral language development. So if kids are feeling anxious, if they're wearing masks in pre-K, they just don't have that immediate social interaction and base level confidence upon which learning occurs.
Jordan's preschool and kindergarten years were upended by the pandemic, yet she's doing well at school academically and learning to deal with her anxiety.
We do breathing. She does breath work. We do some meditation music that helps settle her in the evening also. So we're coping. It's getting better.
Just as kids get back on track, parents are hoping the Omicron variant doesn't mean a return to remote learning this winter. The unknown is yet another source of anxiety. Laura Trevelyan, BBC News, New York.
Now, Zimbabwe has started paying out US dollars bonuses to government workers as a cushion against the effects of price increases and a falling local currency. When the public started rejecting the inflation-hit Zimbabwe dollar, authorities effectively abandoned it in favor of international currencies like the US dollar. The BBC's Singai Nyoka reports from Harare.
Long lines form outside a foreign exchange bureau. Some spent the night here. A recent government policy allows those who earn local currency to exchange it for up to $200 in cash.
Everything now is charged in US dollars. My rent, goods in many shops and even schools are now demanding US dollars.
The exchange rate offered here is better compared to the black market rates that we found on the street, which kill our ability to provide for our families. It is why we are here like this.
The Zimbabwe dollar, reintroduced in 2019, has devalued by 25% in the last 3 months, and it's slowly being rejected. The thirst for US dollars is everywhere. The people here are waiting to collect US dollars cash sent by their relatives living abroad. Authorities say a lot of it will end up on the black market, a market it blames for the collapsing local currency. The size of Zimbabwe's currency black market is staggering. Everywhere, illegal currency traders sell US dollars to individuals and importers, but at double the official rate. Last year, the government began auctioning the greenback to businesses to try to kill the black market. Inflation tumbled from about 800% to just over 50% a year. It's been welcomed by big business.
We have experienced significant growth in the first and second quarters of 2021. The currency issue presents a risk to the growth already experienced. It also presents a risk to the growth that is anticipated.
But with the central bank only supplying about 30% of companies' needs, the black market is in resurgence. In a tacit admission that the currency is failing yet again, government workers are being paid their year-end bonuses in US dollars. This published author with 2 degrees and a 17-year career earns 29,000 local dollars a month.
About 3 months ago, I think the money was worth about a bit more than $200, so it's being whittled down by about a factor of about $20 to $30 every month. So every month I've got to cover that gap. I've got to think of a method of getting that money.
With most major franchises and shops charging either in US dollars or the local currency at the black market rate and an open defiance of the law, the fear is that Zimbabweans could one day reject their currency, just as they did in 2009. Singai Nyoka, BBC News, Harare.
Now to quite a remarkable discovery. Scientists have found a perfectly preserved dinosaur embryo. It was discovered in southern China and thought to be at least 66 million years old. Dr. Fion-Wai-Sam Ma was part of the research group, and she says it's the best dinosaur embryo ever found in history.
This fossil was discovered in Guangzhou city of southern China in around 2000. And then it was hidden in the storage for 15 years. So it was not until 2015 that the curator of the museum sorted through the boxes in the storage and rediscovered the fossil. And then they arrange very detailed fossil preparation. So they remove the rock covering the skeleton, and finally we see this amazing fossil. This dinosaur belongs to an Oviraptorosaur. So Oviraptorosaur is a theropod dinosaur group that existed during the Cretaceous, and they are always described as bird-like because they are covered with feathers. They don't have any teeth, but instead they have a beak. So for this particular specimen, we see it has a very unique posture with the body curled up and its head in between its leg. And this posture is very similar to what we see in a late stage embryo of a living bird.
What an incredible discovery. And that is going to end the final edition of Newsday for 2021. Of course, we'll have a lot of special programs over the holiday season right here on BBC World News. And Newsday will be back on the 4th of January. But for now, from all of us here in Singapore and in London, thank you so much for watching and happy holidays. We'll see you again in the new year. Karishma will be back on the 4th of January, so don't forget to tune in. Thanks for watching.
Live from Singapore, essential business news as it breaks and a look at the economic news that will shape the day. This is BBC World News and Asia Business Report.
A potential game changer in the battle against COVID-19. The United States approves a new treatment that can be taken at home. And it's been called a crisis like no other. We look at how the pandemic is robbing the youth and women of opportunities in Asia. Hi there, welcome to Asia Business Report with me, Mariko Oi. Let's begin today in the United States, which has granted an emergency authorization for a COVID-19 antiviral pill. The oral treatment from Pfizer is the first of its kind to receive approval, and it can be taken at home. The move comes as the world's biggest economy battles against a wave of Omicron cases. Our North America business correspondent Michelle Fleury has the reaction from New York, where sentiment is positive, but there are also warnings that this is no magic bullet.